Node and Express.js are pretty complex technologies, and if you're like me and come from a traditional web background, they can be a little bit confusing to figure out. So let's talk about what Node is and why you may want to use it on some of your projects. In basic terms, Node.js allows you to run JavaScript on a server. Node uses V8, the same engine that the Chrome browser uses to display pages on your machine, but it lets you put this engine on a server. Because the server is running JavaScript, you can program your server in a way that is similar to what you might know from working with JavaScript on the client. Node.js, though, has some unique features that, when tapped on the server, provide some advantages over other languages. So let's take a look at those. What does a V8-based JavaScript engine on the server give us? Well, first of all, JavaScript, as you probably know, is an event-driven language. Now think about what happens when you load up a page. If you've built some interactivity on a JavaScript document, it generally sits there waiting for something to happen. Now we call this events, and they can be things like a click, waiting for something to load, or a form submission. Now how would that help us if we were on a server? Well, in the same way that we can wait for user interaction on the client, Node can track a variety of events happening on the server, say a database loading, a file transfer, or even client interaction. But Node does this in a very unique way. Now, one of the most powerful features of Node.js is that it's designed to avoid waiting for things to happen. Now, this is very different than what happens when you make requests from a traditional server. Now, say, for example, that you create a request to a database. Well, the server generally requests the data from the server, but then has to wait until the server queries the database and returns the data before doing anything else. And we call that blocking. And if you've ever done a complex database query, you've probably seen instances where the client has to just sit and wait for that process to be done. But Node excels at handling two-way connections between the server and, say, a database. So when Node makes a request to a database, it doesn't have to worry about waiting for that database to return the data. And once the data is received from the server, it sends it to the appropriate client. So it's much more efficient than traditional server languages. Now, the ability to handle connections is why Node is really good at creating real-time applications. Because of its non-blocking architecture, Node can handle a lot of connections simultaneously and is great at creating applications where the client is talking to the server. But unlike other services, it's really good at applications where the server needs to push the data to the client or where clients need to communicate with each other. So things like chats, multiplayer games, real-time data streaming, and more. Node isn't just a fad. It's become quite popular with Main Street companies like Walmart and PayPal. If you're trying to figure out if Node.js is the right platform for your web application, you should take the time to watch a couple of these videos, one from PayPal and one from Walmart. So you may be ready to go run into your server and install Node.js. But before you do, let's take a look at some of the challenges that happen when working with Node. Now first, Node.js is not going to run on a traditional Apache server, so you won't be able to go to a cheap host like 1&1, GoDaddy, and start running your Node applications. It requires a host that has installed Node.js or that you yourself install it on your server. Now, thankfully, there's a lot of hosts that offer it. In this course, we'll be using a popular host called Heroku. It will allow you to create a free Node.js application. Node.js also requires some pretty advanced knowledge of JavaScript, so it's not the thing you want to tackle right after your first JavaScript class. You really need to have a good understanding about functions, JavaScript objects, modules, and other advanced JavaScript concepts. Now, thankfully, we've got a lot of courses that can help. Now, I've created a playlist called Modern JavaScript that can help you be comfortable with some of these concepts. Another issue with Node is that it requires a lot of installations. We'll be using Heroku to publish our website, which in itself requires that you work with Git. But in addition to that, you need to, of course, install Node, Express, and additional modules to get it to work. Node.js is itself a very concise library, so you're going to need to add modules in order to expand its capabilities. If you take a look at the API documentation, you'll see that Node itself is very tiny. Now, there isn't much here, so this brings me to another issue. Node by itself wasn't really designed for creating websites. It was really created to handle server tasks, and so building a site with Node.js requires additional libraries. In this course, I'll be showing you how to work with the Express.js framework. So Node won't be your go-to tool for every type of project, but it's really good at handling two-way network communications. You can build a website using Node, but in order to do so, you're really going to need something on top of Node, like Express.js, that will make it more user-friendly.